Hello everyone, Tmmgamer, and today I have the pleasure of bringing you another one of my football talk videos, the series where I sit down and talk a little bit about real life football. And there's only one thing I'm going to be talking about, obviously, and that is the World Cup. It is underway, a couple of days in now, and there's already been some fantastic matches played. Some shock results, some great performances, some individual errors, some refereeing decisions which are pretty dreadful, and overall it's been an interesting start to the tournament. But first, let's talk about England, because England played their first game last night against Italy. Unfortunately for an England perspective, it was a 2-1 defeat, and it's a bit of a disappointing start to the group. In saying that, I actually thought we played alright yesterday. There was no horrible performances from anybody. And at the end of the day, it was so evenly matched. I don't think anybody could argue that Italy outplayed us yesterday. It was a very, very tight game. And it only really came down to one chance. Mario Balotelli scored his header at the back post. And Wayne Rooney shanked his chance wide when he was clear in a lot of space in the box. He did the keeper with the eyes. The keeper went the wrong way. And he just dragged his shot wide. And that was the difference between the sides. I thought... both players, Sterling and Candreva, those were the two standout performances for Italy and England, and they pretty much cancelled each other out. The defences were pretty much the same. Midfield, both teams had a lot of the ball, both teams looked dangerous at times, and both teams sat deep at times. It was really, really tight, and this is what you have to be at the very, very highest level. You can't afford to miss chances like that, because Italy are a good side, and they punished us in the end for missing a couple of chances. But I have to say, overall, I was relatively pleased with the performance, because what everybody said at the start of this tournament was we wanted Roy Hodgson to go out there and pick the young players. We wanted England to have a go. We didn't want us just to sit back and get completely trashed by teams. And all of those things happened. Sterling was starting. Henderson started. All of these youngsters. Barkley came on and had a very, very good impact. We picked these youngsters and they had a decent game, and unfortunately the result wasn't in our favour. But this is what we wanted Roy Hodgson to do. We wanted him to go out and pick these players, and he did that. And they came trumped through when it mattered. Sterling, in his first competitive start for England, was very, very good. He absolutely terrified the Italian defence, created some great chances, ran with the ball, was positive. And even in 92nd minute, when it looked like we'd lost, he was tracking back, working hard, all of the things that you want from a young player, and he was very, very impressive. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, a defeat is still a defeat. Doesn't matter how well you play, there's only one stat that matters, and that's the goals, and Italy scored one more goal than England. But the refreshing thing is, we actually looked dangerous, and when we're going into the match on Thursday against Uruguay, Uruguay were turned over by Costa Rica, and to be honest, they just imploded in that second half. And this is the thing with Uruguay, they've got some absolutely incredibly talented players, but they also have a lot of average players. And if we play as we did last night against Italy, against Uruguay in a few days' time, I back us to win the game. But that's the thing, we have to take our chances. You can't afford to have all of this play and all of this possession and miss the chances we missed, because it will come back to bite us. And like we saw last night, Wayne Rooney missed that chance. If that had gone in, completely different game, you never know, England could have gone on and won the game, but it didn't. And you saw the deflating effect that had. It was a big, big miss from Wayne Rooney. And Wayne starting on the left, he's not a left midfielder. You can't play Wayne Rooney on the left midfield, but this is a real selection dilemma for Roy Hodgson, because our best player on the night, by a long way, was Raheem Sterling playing in that number 10 role. Our goal scorer was Daniel Sturridge playing up front. And those are Wayne Rooney's best two positions, either as an out-and-out striker or as that sort of number 10 position which has been coined recently. Although number 10 play all over the place normally, but this number 10 position, which is behind the front man, those are his two best positions. So if you play him in those positions, who do you leave out? Do you drop Daniel Sturridge? Do you move Sterling wide? That is an option perhaps that I'd like to see. I'd like to see Rooney start in the middle, Sterling on the right, and Welbeck on the left. And you can have the three of them interchange. I don't think it has to be very, very rigid. But Rooney just looked lost out on the left wing. He put in an absolutely phenomenal ball for Daniel Sturridge's goal. But that's the thing, if you play him in that number 10 position, he's naturally going to drift over the place and provide assists and passes. When you just have him in that wide role, I think it definitely takes it out of him. And we've already got Danny Welbeck, who's a disciplined player who can track back and do the defensive side, because I think that's why Roy Hodgson plays him out wide and played Welbeck and Rooney as the two wide players, because they're a little bit more disciplined, and it sort of enables Raheem Sterling just to go out and do what he does, just run at defenders, be very, very attacking. But unfortunately, it didn't really work out. Wayne Rooney is our best player, and you have to play your best players in their best positions if you want to do well at a tournament. So next game for me, I'd possibly like to see Jack Wilshere start. I thought Jordan Henderson did a decent job in midfield, but I think Wilshere just provides something a little bit more. Obviously, Roy Hodgson wanted to maintain that Liverpool axis in midfield, and the Sterling, Henderson, Gerrard triumvirate in midfield. But I think Jack Wilshere's got a little bit more about him. I do like Jack Wilshere as a player, and I'd like to see him start the next game against Uruguay. And up front, I'd like to see Rooney starting that number 10 role. I thought Welbeck and Sterling did pretty well, especially Sterling, but I thought Welbeck did pretty well as well. After everybody was saying, oh, they didn't really want him to start. In the end, Roy Hodgson threw a little bit of a curveball. Everybody thought it was going to be a straight choice between Sterling and Welbeck. In the end, it was Adam Lallana who dropped to the bench. And in the end, I thought that was a good decision. They both played decent roles, and they both terrified Italians. Danny Welbeck had a very good first half. And at the end of the day, I'd like to see them both start again. I think they both did enough. Sterling, like I mentioned, was England's best player by a long, long way. And I think Welbeck had a very good first half, was brought off in the second to try something a little bit different. The only blot on Danny Welbeck's game was Italy's second goal, where he just didn't track back. He'd done it all game, and in the one time he was just wandering back. Italy broke down that right-hand side. Candreva checked back and put in a great ball for Balotelli. If Welbeck had actually put his foot down and ran back there, he put a bit more pressure on the wide player. Possibly that cross didn't go in as easily as it did, and you never know. But these are the ifs and buts. You've got to play every second of the game as hard as you can, because like I mentioned, we're at a very, very high level now. This is the World Cup. Italy is a very, very good team. You cannot afford to switch off even for a second, because when you do, they score their goal, and that's exactly what happened. We were punished, and then when our chance came, we weren't clinical enough to take it. So that's the only thing I'd really change. Move Rooney in the centre, bring Wilshere in. The back five's pretty much going to pick itself. It's just very, very straightforward to pick that back five. It's the best back five we've got at the moment. That's not going to change, so just those few changes, and we can go into the Uruguay game with a bit of confidence, because like I mentioned, they were dreadful against Costa Rica in the second half. They really were. And I don't think Costa Rica are world beaters by any stretch of the imagination. In my opinion, they're still the worst team in the group, but Uruguay just completely fell flat. And if we go out and play well, we have a good chance of beating them. But the problem is now, are Uruguay going to play worse than they did? They got Maxi Pereira sent off, but they're going to have Luis Suarez back, and we don't know how fit he is. But even an 80% fit Luis Suarez is still someone you've got to pay a lot of attention to. So that's going to be a dangerous game. But I still back us to get out of the group. It's going to be tough. We're going to have to win 2 games realistically. But it's still in our own hands. We've lost to Italy. It's not the end of the world. As long as we just keep ourselves together, keep playing attacking football, we can win our 2 games and go through. And from there, anything happens. You never know in the World Cup. It'd just be nice to get out of the group. It'd be a bit deflating to see us go home in the group stage. It is a tricky group. Uruguay and Italy are two good sides on paper. The Italians showed it on the pitch yesterday, and Uruguay I don't think will play as badly as they did against Costa Rica. So that's going to be tough for us. But I still back us to get through. And that's all I wanted to say on England. Actually, no, there's one more thing I wanted to say on England. Whatever happens, I hope Roy Hodgson stays in the job, because the worst thing I think we can do is sack him prematurely. He's doing a very, very solid job. He's a dependable manager. He's actually given the England job a sense of stability, because when we've had all these managers before, it's always been a bit of a crazy train with England. Roy is just a calm guy. Like I mentioned, he's picking the young players. He's building for the future. He's only really been in the job for a tournament, because when he came in for the last Euros, it was at the last minute. He didn't have any preparation. He was basically playing with a team that wasn't his, and over the last 2 years he's slowly building his team up, and he's playing Barkley and Sterling and giving them experience, and hopefully we have a good showing, we get to the quarterfinals, whatever, and then he can build on that. But the last thing I think England need is another change of manager. We need a bit of stability, and we've seen that all of the best teams around, Del Bosque with Spain, given a long run as manager, and he did great things. And that brings me very, very nicely into Del Bosque's possibly worst ever day as Spain manager, because this is the major shock of the tournament so far. Spain getting absolutely destroyed by the Netherlands, and I don't mean defeated, absolutely destroyed. And if any of you guys watched that game, I don't think you could disagree with that. The second half, Spain were just mullered. And I have to say, Iker Casillas was dreadful. Proper football legend, one of the most decorated players of all time, and he will rightly be remembered as one of the best goalkeepers of all time. But that was a performance of a guy who looks a little bit over the hill now. And there was this massive brouhaha when Jose Mourinho left him out of the team at Real Madrid a couple of seasons back. And I think he saw what now most of us are seeing, that Casillas is a little bit past it, unfortunately. You know, he's dropped off, and he just made some abysmal errors, really, really bad errors. You know, for Van Persie's goal, when he just nicked the ball off him after a terrible touch, he flapped at crosses, just punched balls back into the box. Just awful, awful performance. And you've got Pepe Reina and David De Gea in the squad, who are two very, very good goalkeepers. And that is a massive call now for Del Bosque. Does he actually drop Casillas? You know, captain, legend, etc., etc. But you need people who can win you football matches right now. And can Iker Casillas do that for Spain anymore? That's the big question. I thought Diego Costa was a little underwhelming as well. You know, he got rightly a very, very bad reception from the Brazilian fans. Don't forget, this is a guy who was capped by Brazil in friendly matches and then turned his back on his country to play for Spain. You know, I don't understand that decision. Yeah, it's Spain, but it's not like you're, you know, playing for a Pacific island and you want to turn out for somebody with a bit more chance of winning. You have an opportunity to play for Brazil in a home World Cup when they have actually a very good chance of winning the tournament. And I think obviously Diego Costa would start ahead of Fred, because Fred did absolutely nothing apart from, well, it wasn't a dive, but go down incredibly softly for a penalty. I think Diego Costa's 3 times the player Fred is, so he would have almost certainly have started. And if you put Diego Costa into that Brazil team, they definitely go up a notch. I mean, they're still a fantastic side with a lot of talented players, but he would give them an absolutely top quality finisher, which is something, you know, they don't particularly have. I don't think Fred is an amazing player. He doesn't do a lot. He just seems to be a proper old-fashioned poacher who pretty much stands still and relies on the rest of the team to create chances. You know, Costa is an excellent finisher, but he's also a big lad, a target man. He can hold the ball up. He runs in behind defenders. You know, I can't believe his decision, really, and it's looking quite a bad one after the performance against the Dutch. But it doesn't matter how bad Spain were. You know, the Netherlands were absolutely fantastic in that second half. They came out. Ron Vlaar was a rock at the back. You know, fingers crossed he can keep doing that at Aston Villa. But you know, the Dutch are a dangerous team. Any team with Schneider, Van Persie and Robben in it can cause problems. And we saw Arjen Robben. You know, a lot of people think he's overrated. You know, he came out and showed why he's such a top-class player. When it really, really mattered in a huge game against the Spanish at a World Cup, he was phenomenal. You know, scored goals, created chances, was just outstanding. Robin Van Persie as well. Excellent header. That's one of the best headers I think I've ever seen, because you know, Blind hits this unbelievable 50-yard ball, but this thing is coming out of the sky over his shoulder as well. This is just such a difficult skill, and he just plops it in the top corner like it's nothing. Like he's just writing a letter or eating a sandwich. Just so natural to him. It's absolutely incredible finish. And from there, the Dutch just grew and grew and grew, and Spain shrunk. And this is not the Spain squad of old, you know, this terrifying force of world football. They're still a very, very good team, and they could easily come back and, you know, tear the tournament apart. Don't forget as well, last World Cup they lost their first match to Switzerland and then won the tournament. So you can't write them off yet, but this is not the all-conquering Spain squad, you know, the terrifying Spain squad that it was when, like, 4 or 5 years ago, when Xavi was in his prime and Iniesta was in his prime. You know, arguably they should be better. Like I said, they've got actually a number 9 now, a proper striker in Diego Costa, but he doesn't fit with the style that made Spain so good. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of tiki-taka. I personally don't think it's very, very enjoyable to watch. But in terms of a technical point of view, it's an incredible style. I mean, Spain regularly kept 70% possession and just passed teams off the park. You know, they had this false number 9, which normally Cesc Fabregas played up front, and he'd drop deep and just keep the ball effortlessly in the final third. And admittedly, they wouldn't have many shots on target, but they would just keep it, wear you down, and eventually score the goal, win 1-0, and just easily ease through the game. They don't do that anymore. And up against a team like, for example, the Dutch, with some quality attacking players, they don't defend very well. I mean, the defending from Spain was schoolboy. And when you look at their back four, like with players like Ramos and Piqué and Alba and Azpilicueta, these are top-class footballers, but as a collective, they defended abysmally against the Dutch, flat out abysmally. And it's hard to see that they're going to go very, very far playing like that. You know, this is now huge. They've got a huge game coming up against Chile. That is a very dangerous side who could very realistically take points off the Spanish, and if that happens, they're in dire trouble. They really are. You know, all of a sudden, it looks like the Dutch might top the group, and Spain might not even qualify, which would be huge news. And that is a realistic possibility now. If they play like they did in the second half of the Dutch game against Chile, they will lose. There's no if, buts, or maybes about that. The Chileans are a good side, got a lot of good attacking players. They can win that game easily. So it sets up a very, very intriguing second round of fixtures in a huge number of groups. Obviously, must-win games next to Spain and England, but there's still so many storylines, and the tournament is still so young. So, guys, thank you again for listening to the video. I really hope you've enjoyed it. What did you guys think of Spain and England? Was Spain as bad as they looked? Do England still have a chance to go through and do well at the tournament? You know, I'll be interested in hearing your opinions. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.